Thank you guys so much for being here. As our host said, I'm from the UVA Center for Politics. So we do a number of things there. But one of the things that we are most known for is our newsletter called Sabato's Crystal Ball. And basically, it is a free publication for everyone. We kind of track like who's running, what the elections are looking like. Our focus is mostly like president, Congress, that type of thing, like upper level in American politics. But one thing that we also do is we make forecasts. And I'm going to walk y'all through some of our forecasts and some of the things we look for. And really, we're going to talk about how like we have to account for like some of the structural things about American politics, such as I'm going to talk a lot today of if you follow the presidential election here, something you're probably going to hear a lot about is this thing called the Electoral College. That's the way we elect our president in America. So I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint slide. Let me see if I can share this many. Let's see. All right. All right. Can y'all see that? Good. All right. All right. So I gave kind of a presentation to another group last week. I'm going to modify it a little, but this kind of gives you a sense. So one of the things I said that we do at Sabato's Crystal Ball is we make presidential predictions. So if you look at this was the prediction that we made in 2020. The states that we have in blue, we thought they were going to go to Joe Biden. The states that we have in red, we had going to Donald Trump. And from this map, you can kind of see what basically the geographic layout of America is. Really in kind of in the middle of the country, you have all these dark red states that went very much to Donald Trump. You also have some states that basically Trump won, but were a little more competitive. You have Texas here. You have states like Florida as well. And same thing with the Democratic side. For instance, Joe Biden did very well in the state of New York. He also did well in California. But those states that are in light blue were the ones that we thought were the important ones. Those are the states that Joe Biden very narrowly won. This is something we'll talk about a little later, but to get elected president in America, you don't need to win the popular vote. All you need to do is get 270 votes in the Electoral College. So that's why like each state. So basically in America, the Electoral College is this body where every state has so many electoral votes. For instance, in my state of Virginia, you can kind of see it right here, we have 13 electoral votes. What that means is, as you'll probably know, we have we have the two chambers of Congress. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives, which is the lower chamber, has 435 members. They are each based on population. So California, for instance, it's kind of hard to see, but they have 55 electoral votes. They have the most population of any state. In Virginia, in the House of Representatives, we have 11 people. So you're asking me, okay, well, if Virginia has 11 people in the House of Representatives, why do we have 13 electoral votes? And the reason for that is every state, the number of votes they get in the Electoral College is the number that they have in the House, which is based on population, plus 2 votes for their people in the Senate. The Senate, which is the upper house, has 100 members. every state, regardless of population, has 2 people in the Senate. So, some people have argued, well, that's not really democratic because, a big state like California has the exact same number of people in the Senate as Virginia, which is a much smaller state. We both have 2, but that's how it works. That's how it was kind of set up by our founders. It's so you kind of add all that up, and there are some things like Washington, D.C., which is our capital. They have the 3 electoral votes as well, even though they're not a state. So you put all this together, the whole thing called the Electoral College has 538 electoral votes total. Half of that is 270, or I should say 270 is a bare majority of that 538. So to become elected president, you just need to win 270 electoral votes. The whole kind of system came out of, as some of you guys probably know, like as a country, we technically won our independence from England in 1776. That was when we signed the Declaration of Independence. But I would say really it wasn't until the Constitutional Convention in 1787 in Philadelphia that we really kind of became a country. That was when, even though it was after 1776, that was when we really became a country. That was when our Constitution was kind of put together. And, the Constitution, it's a great document, of course, but the founding fathers of America were sort of pressed for time to get something done. Interestingly, when the founding fathers were debating about how the president was going to be elected, the kind of dominant method at the time, or at least that they thought, was they thought Congress would be the body that elects the president. But some people said, oh, well, maybe we should do a popular vote of everyone. So basically, the idea of this electoral college was sort of a compromise. It is, obviously kind of imperfect, but it left the founding fathers at the convention happy enough. So it gave everyone a little of everything, and it's the system that we have been using since to elect our U.S. executive or president. One thing I'll say about the map that we're looking at right now, so this was our prediction that we made in 2020. We only got one state wrong in this whole electoral map. The only state that we got wrong here was we have the state of North Carolina here, right south of me in Virginia. We thought Biden was going to carry it. It ended up very narrowly going to Donald Trump. So like if you look at our prediction last time, we got 49 out of 50 states right. I'm hoping we're that accurate next week. We'll see. So again, this was the this was the kind of actual result of the 2020 election. Joe Biden here, who is in the blue, got 303 electoral votes, which is more than the 270 that you need. That's why he won the presidential election. And then kind of this is where we see things now. Of course, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard, basically Biden dropped out, and the Democratic nomination went to his vice president, Kamala Harris. And when Biden was still in, you can see here, he was facing a really rough electoral map against Donald Trump. We had, we think that if Biden had stayed in, that Trump and the Republicans, you can see kind of at the bottom right that we favored Trump in over 300 electoral votes. So it was looking very rough for Biden if he stayed in. Instead, this is our map now. So you can kind of see same basic geography as that first map I showed you. If you look at most of the states in like the southern part and the middle part of America, they're mostly deep red. We think Donald Trump is going to do well in those areas. The states that we have in blue here are the states where we think Harris is going to end up winning. But what the whole election is going to come down to is those 7 states that we have in yellow. Those are the toss-up states. Those states could go either way. Basically starting up here, so it's basically Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And if you look at our totals, all of these toss-up states account for 93 electoral votes. Right now, we don't have either side over that important number of 270. But when we make our final prediction, which is going to be this time next week, we are going to move all of those yellow toss-up states to one side or the other. So and most of those states are very close. So I think we're going to have a hard time making our prediction. So we'll see what happens this week in this final last week. And if you look at polls, all of these toss-up states are very close. Kind of basically, the kind of columns here represent they're like a different. In America, we have different poll aggregators or different forecasters who try to spit out numbers for how they think each state is going to vote, and every state is very close. One thing that you might notice here is if you look at all these 7 states, they're all really close. They're within a few points. What's the weirdest thing, I guess, to someone from the outside trying to get an understanding of how we run things here in America, is if you look at the national line here, Harris is consistently up by about 2 percentage points. So you kind of could say, well, Miles, why is it that, okay, well, at the national level, Harris is doing so well, but why are all of these states close? Why could she still lose? And what is weird about the Electoral College system is that the winner of the national popular vote, basically, if you took every state and you combined their votes, the national popular vote winner does not always win in the Electoral College. That has happened 5 times throughout the course of American history. The first instances were 1824, then 1876, then 1888, which is all kind of varying. That's ancient history at this point, but it happened in 2000, where Al Gore, who was the candidate for the Democrats, got more votes than George W. Bush. What made the difference for George W. Bush was he very narrowly carried the state of Florida by like 500 votes out of like many millions cast, and that's what got him into the White House. And what's interesting is all 5 times in American history that where the national popular vote winner has not won in the Electoral College, all 5 times it was against the Democrat. So basically Al Gore was, he was one of the more recent ones to lose against George W. Bush. Interestingly enough, in 2004, George W. Bush, as you can see from the map on the left, George W. Bush was reelected with 286 electoral votes. He won all those states that are in red. And you can kind of see at the top that, excuse me, George W. Bush won the national popular vote too. Unlike his first time in 2000, in 04, he wins the national popular vote by about 3 points, 51 to 48 up here. Now, what would have been interesting is the key state that year was Ohio, which is kind of right here, kind of in the middle of the country. If you look at Ohio, which was the key state, John Kerry only lost it 51 to 49. So if John Kerry, the Democrat, had done a little better in Ohio, he could have won in the Electoral College without winning the popular vote. So I always think that like it's weird that like how the if you think these days like it's the Democrats who are really against the Electoral College and like it's the Republicans who are really for it. Would history be different if John Kerry had done a little better in Ohio, wins it, and beats George Bush while losing the popular vote? That was a very real, of course, it didn't end up happening, but it was a very real possibility at the time. Now, where does that, one of the probably most recent reforms at trying to get rid of the Electoral College was after the 1968 election. It was called the Buy-Seller Amendment, where if you look at 1968, Hubert Humphrey, who was the Democratic candidate, lost the national popular vote, but he was very close with Richard Nixon, who was the Republican. But if you look at the Electoral College, Nixon did very well. He got over 300 electoral votes. Humphrey, as a Democrat, was all the way back at 191. What was also going on in 1968 is you had this guy named George Wallace, who was a segregationist, racist candidate. He did well in a lot of southern states, and so there was a big push after the 1968 election to get rid of the Electoral College, but we kind of ended up sticking with it. So so it's here to stay, I guess. I have one. 1 second, guys. Let me find y'all a. 1 second. 1 second, guys. Let me pull up a. I thought I had something in my PowerPoint, but I did not. Let me pull it up really quick.
Miles, meanwhile, can you two quick question, and I think that you can answer them in the next slides that you will be presenting. One
Yes.
would be just for everyone to understand exactly how it works, but the difference between the Electoral College and the popular vote, just briefly, so that everyone will be on the same level of understanding. And the second thing, general question, in the elections of Nixon or of Roosevelt, all the elections during, let's say, between the 40s to the 70s, we have seen this kind of red wave or blue wave all across the US. It's not the case anymore. What changed in the American society so that no one is able to convince both the college, the Electoral College, than the popular vote?
It's I guess I'll start with that second one first. And I would be very surprised now, like if we have a big landslide election in America anymore. You know, probably like the biggest recent electoral, not landslide, but like Obama in '08, right? When Barack Obama first ran, you know, that was very historic. You know, he was the first African American. He had a very good showing. But even Obama, he got, you know, 53% of the popular vote. Okay, you know, that's something, but it's not like what, you know, back in the 1930s, like Franklin Roosevelt used to get like, you know, 60%, or, you know, Ronald Reagan used to get like, you know, 60% too. So I would say one of the things that's maybe made some of the few states in the Electoral College more important is that Americans as a society, I just feel like we are so polarized that, you know, if you are the Democratic candidate, 47% of the country is going to vote for you almost no matter what. If you're the Republican, 47% is going to vote for you no matter what. It all comes down to that, you know, 4 or 5% of the voters who are in the middle, who could go either way, who are in some of those toss-up states I talked about earlier. So that's why, you know, it's not really it's not really a national election in the kind of sense that so many states now lean heavily towards one party or the other. And, you know, my state of Virginia, we've been voting Democratic since 2008. So like that would be 4 or 5 straight elections. So Kamala Harris is not worried that she's going to lose the state of Virginia now because we are a Democratic state. So, you know, yes, we are getting one visit next week from Donald Trump, but we don't really get much attention other than that. You know, I will tell you a little bit of a story. Is the weekend before last weekend, my girlfriend and Medi, like this is getting into the stuff I do in my spare time now. My girlfriend wanted to visit the Hershey Chocolate Factory, which is in Pennsylvania. If you're ever in Pennsylvania, I would recommend it. But anyway, at first, you know, I just wanted to stay home that weekend and relax because, you know, I have this election coming up, and but because she wanted to go, I'm like, okay, fine, I'll make the 4-hour drive to the Hershey Chocolate Factory in Pennsylvania. But I'm happy I went because other than the fact that the chocolate was really good, what it gave me good appreciation for is, as y'all may have recalled, Pennsylvania was or is one of those toss-up states that could make a difference in the presidential race. In Virginia, if you were in my state, like you know, other than like a few ads for candidates for Congress, stuff like that, you really wouldn't have much of an idea that the election is going on right now, because we're just totally ignored. But oh my God, as soon as you crossed over into Pennsylvania, that's when you start seeing, you know, signs and billboards and Trump and Harris. It is everywhere. You cannot miss it. And, you know, those toss-up states are like almost like an entirely different world from the rest of the country. You know, when you think about like the kind of attention they get from candidates. So that's definitely one of the differences I've kind of noticed. And I think this is also getting to your first question is, you know, how the Electoral College works is, you know, so it is made up, you know, it is 538 members. It is made up of what we call electors, who those are the ones who actually cast votes. So like, let's say next week, let's say that Kamala Harris wins the state of Virginia, as I expect. So Harris wins the popular vote here in Virginia. So the state Democratic Party submits 13 names, and the 13 people that the state Democratic Party put forward, they meet in our state capital in December, and they all cast their votes for Kamala Harris. And that happens in every state. If Donald Trump wins my state, then the state Republican Party basically puts forward 13 people who cast votes for him. That happens in every state. And in January, all of those votes are tallied up by Congress, and that's how they give the election to one party or the other. Whoever has 270 of those electoral votes wins. And it is one thing that and I'm going to pull this up here. Let's see. 1 second, guys. I'm not sure. Okay. So one of the things that you may hear talked about with the Electoral College, and I think after I explain this one thing, I'll take a few kind of questions, because I think I gave you a lot as it is. But one thing we talk about is the concept of bias in the Electoral College. So if you look at the national popular vote in 2020, Joe Biden would have beat Donald Trump by 4 percentage points, basically 52 to 48. So let's do a little kind of exercise here. Is what if we lined up every state from most Democratic to most Republican? Joe Biden's best state over here on one side, Donald Trump's best state here on the other side of the spectrum. So for instance, Biden did very well in Washington, D.C. He got like 90% of the vote. That was his best state. That gives him 3 electoral votes. His next best state was the state of Vermont. That gives him 3 more electoral votes. So like that's 6. So you start adding up these states, and the state that would have put Biden over 270 electoral votes was the state of Wisconsin, which is kind of up here in the middle of the country. So even though Biden won the national popular vote by 4 percentage points, Biden carried Wisconsin, which was the key state, by about half of a point. So to carry that crucial state that gets him to 270, he has to win the national popular vote by much more. He needs to win it by 4 points. So that's what people talk about if you hear about the kind of concept of, like, when the Democrats say, oh, well, the Electoral College is hard for us. That's right, because if you look at these states I have in deep blue on this map, so the states that are in light blue, like California and Illinois and New York, those are states that Biden carried by more than he won the national popular vote. He did better than winning just those states by 4 percentage points. But the states that are in dark blue here, those states were all very close. He carried them, but by less than his popular vote 4-point margin. So that's why that's part of why. But if you want to read our articles, we talk more about this. But that's one thing where, like, the Democrats argue that the Electoral College is biased against them, because basically to win those key states, they usually need to get a big margin in the national popular vote. Now, that's something that has changed a little from year to year, as I talked about a little earlier. In 2004, you could say that the Electoral College bias was in favor of John Kerry if he just won Ohio. But now it seems like it's something that, at least in Trump's elections, has been against the Democrats. So questions now.
to the questions. We have here one of the questions of Nadia Shariaf that we received a lot, even through the registration link, is related to the social media, the role of the social media in landscaping and creating a new landscape for the US elections since 2012, or I think even in 2008 somehow.
Well, in 2008, which was like the first campaign I followed, maybe I'm kind of I'm kind of making myself seem old to some people, but it was the first campaign I followed. At the time, it was a very big thing that Obama made a big push to get his ads and his campaign on Facebook and on social media and on that type of thing. And for a while, it seemed like the Republicans were playing catch up. Now these days, I've seen a lot of very successful campaigns, not just for presidential, but for races like Congress as well. You use TikTok, and I am a millennial myself. I view TikTok as like a Gen Z type thing. I don't partake in that, but that's something now that's very popular with campaigns trying to reach younger voters. My sister, for example, is in her 20s. She's pretty apolitical, but something that got her tuned into the election about a month or so ago is she's always on Instagram. So you can bet she noticed when Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris. So that got her attention. So I think it's, and this is not to say that social media is completely replacing like TV or knocking on doors or that type of thing, but if you're a smart campaign these days, you do have like a traditional campaign, door knocking, fundraising operation, but you're also reaching out to people on social media. There are firms where some of the political consulting firms that work with campaigns are very good at targeting voters of, okay, well, I need more voters in this geographic area. We're going to market our Facebook ads here. So, campaigns these days are very strategic about trying to target the voters that they can get on social media for sure. One, I'm going to take this question quick just because it was the first one I saw pop up, and I think it was from that same person, is the states to watch next week. Because that's when I get a lot is, I would say Harris, for her to win, she's going to need to win all three of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. I talked earlier about kind of Wisconsin being the kind of key state that got Biden over 270 electoral votes last election, which was definitely true. Also in 2020, Biden did win some states like Georgia and Arizona in the kind of southern part of this part of the country that those were nice to have. Those kind of padded his margin over Donald Trump, but Harris needs to win those three states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, in what we call the industrial North. She needs to win all of those. One thing I'll note as well is other than the presidential contest, we are also having races this year for the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House is going to be very close, but for the Senate, the key states to watch are basically Democrats are going into this election with a majority in the with a 51 to 49 majority in the Senate. The Republicans only need to win one of either Montana or Ohio. Those are not toss-up states at the presidential level, but both of those states are states that are likely to vote for Donald Trump, but they have Democratic incumbents. So basically, the Republicans are going to get an automatic pickup in the state of West Virginia, which gets them up to 50-50. For the Republicans to get an outright majority of 51 seats in the chamber, they only need to win one of either Ohio or Montana. So yes.
Okay, another question, and I think it's very interesting. The last one, someone is asking for the independent candidate. I really feel that in our part of the world, we talk only about the main candidate of the Democrats and the Republicans. Can you tell us about all the others?
Yeah, well, it's so I would say it's funny, like if you talk to Americans, like we'll complain a lot about, oh, how much they hate the two-party system. But at the end of the day, 95% of people are going to go in that booth and they're going to vote for either the Democrat or the Republican. So probably the most prominent third party candidate earlier this year was a guy named Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is the nephew of the late President John F. Kennedy. He has since dropped out and endorsed Trump. He is from a very Democratic family, but he was kind of like politically speaking, I guess, he's like the black sheep of the family, I guess, if you want to call it that. So he was the most prominent one. He dropped out. The other one who's still on the ballot in some states is a woman named Jill Stein, who is running under the Green Party banner. And one thing that I would emphasize always with third parties is one of the disadvantages they have is the kind of presidential election is a state-by-state thing. Some states have very strict rules to make their ballot. Some states are very, 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 very expensive if you want to run in their state. That is a bit of a barrier for third parties who might not be as well funded or as well organized as the two main parties. So I would say, this year, we do have some years like in 2016, which was a pretty good year for third parties. It did probably make the difference in some of the key states just because they were so close. But like at the national level, only about 7% of the vote went to third parties or independent candidates. That went really down in 2020, which I think they only got 1 or 2. I would think this year would probably be a little closer to 2020, where maybe they'll get 2 or 3% of the vote. If that is, if they get enough votes in a state like Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, yes, that could make it. That could end up kind of determining who ends up elected, but that's why like we don't see a lot of third party action in America, just because the system is conducive to the two major parties.
One of the questions that came back very often is, or let's say comment, especially on through emails, is related to misinformation and disinformation, especially during the previous campaign. As we all remember, after the result, one of the two candidates said that the results were not fair, the elections were not transparent, etc. Is there any kind of mechanism that has been created or developed in order to have the more transparent elections, or is there any action that has been taken from the last election from 2020 to now?
One of the special kind of guests we have at the Center for Politics, who's done some work for us, is a guy named Brad Raffensperger, who is the Secretary of State of Georgia. Back in 2020, Georgia was one of the closest states. Donald Trump pressured Brad Raffensperger, as a guy who oversees elections in Georgia, to change votes and find him votes. Basically, Raffensperger told Trump to basically go pound sand. And what Raffensperger has emphasized to us when he's come here is, in Georgia and in many other of these states, the elected officials are doing their job. They are, they always run tests on their systems. They do everything they can to make sure our elections are as secure as they can. Probably, so I'm confident that, we're not going to, I usually say, like, if you see something suspicious on election night or something that looks off, people are quick to assume all kinds of conspiracies, but oftentimes people who work on elections, they're human beings too. Sometimes they make errors. Oftentimes, like, the system, the kind of bureaucracies are large enough that oftentimes, most of the time, those errors are caught. There's so much oversight. I would say what is the kind of so that is to say that our elections are as secure as they could be. That said, I think the bad news since 2020 is I saw a study the other day that the biggest source of misinformation these days is from X, formerly known as Twitter, which is owned by Elon Musk, who is like the biggest spreader of misinformation. Oh my God, so he, and he has such a big platform. He'll tweet out all kinds of odd stuff about how the election is stolen or how the Democrats are trying to rig it. In fact, I was talking to one of my friends the other day who is a Democratic operative, and something that Donald Trump says since he lost last time was, the states like Georgia and Arizona, the kind of Democrats rigged those against me, and my friend who was a Democratic operative was like, okay, well, if we're so good at rigging elections, we should just rig every state. We, not just those states, right? So, most of the stuff you hear from Donald Trump about his conspiracies, they are false, but he has such a platform, and your right-wing infrastructure will, on social media, they'll make what he sounds true, or they'll make it sound like it's accurate. So yes, that is something that I think the American system is still struggling to kind of deal with. But from an elections perspective, we have a lot of people who are just doing their job.
So the first one, the person is asking how possible for the electoral vote to produce a different result than the national popular vote. And the second question is what happens if no presidential candidate gets 270 electoral votes?
Those are both very good questions. I'll take the first one first. So why is it that the national popular vote winner doesn't always win the Electoral College? The problem that the Democrats have is the Electoral College is about winning in the right places. If Hillary, like back in 2016, for example, Hillary Clinton won by a very big margin in the state of California, which has 53 electoral votes. And not 53, but at the time it had 55. So Hillary Clinton was going to win those 55 electoral votes from the state of California, whether she won it by 30 points like what she did, or whether she only won it by 1 point. So, same thing with big states like Illinois and New York, where the Democrats win those states in landslide margins. So they have a lot of wasted votes in those states that they kind of that runs up their popular vote score. But if they can't win those states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, which they each have a lot of electoral votes, if Hillary Clinton narrowly loses those states, she narrowly loses those states. So that's why what I would emphasize about the Electoral College is you have to win in the right places. And then, what happens if there is a tie? Let's say, there are a few scenarios where, there are 538 electoral votes. Half of that is 269. So let's say next week, both candidates get 269 electoral votes. Then what happens is the whole presidential election is kicked to the House of Representatives. And even though this is getting a little wonky now, but the House of Representatives votes to elect the president if no one gets over 270, but it is by delegation. So every state in the House has a delegation, right? In Virginia, we have 11 members in our delegation. But if you look at the math, basically, the Republicans are going to be at the advantage there. So I guess in plain terms, if the Electoral College is tied or someone gets under 270, that's good for the Republicans. I'll just kind of leave it there.
So there are as well 3 questions that are almost talking about the same. Racial minorities, demographics trends, and polling data. The role of these 3 points, how can the racial minorities, demographic trends, or the results and prediction in the polling data influence the voters?
Yes. So I would say what's going to be interesting this year is one of the surprises of the 2020 election was Donald Trump did better than most Republicans do with Hispanics, which is usually a Democratic group. The other thing that was a little so surprising is usually the most Democratic voting bloc in the whole country is African Americans. They usually give Democrats 90 to 95% of their votes. What the Republicans are hoping is that over time, the African American vote is going to get a little more Republican. They may not win it, but if the Republicans get like 15% of the African American vote instead of 10 or 5, then in some of those key states, that may be enough to help them win. What's been the opposite of that is that usually the white vote has been the most Republican. Really, one of the interesting developments from the Trump era is you see this division along political lines within the white vote. What is becoming like one of the most interesting predictors of how you might vote, at least among whites, is whether or not you have a college education. Basically, voters who do not have a college education, who are more working class, they tend to favor Trump a lot more. The educated whites have moved sharply towards Democrats. I guess temperamentally, they don't like Trump. They don't like how he has taken the Republicans in a more populist type of way. So if those key states I talked about earlier, if Harris wins those, it could be a case of, well, she might do a little worse with the minority vote, but she does better with the white vote, who are more basically they're more numerically populous. And in terms of polling this year, polling is all over the map. Basically every pollster says it's going to be a tight race. Part of me thinks, this is just the J. Miles Coleman theory. This is all it is. Part of me thinks that if Harris wins, some of the pollsters, because both in 2016 and 2020, pollsters generally underestimated Trump, because most of them had him losing in 2016. And obviously he ended up winning. In 2020, most polls showed Joe Biden doing very, very well, and Trump almost won. So I think some pollsters now, when they're putting out their final numbers, they don't want to get caught with their pants down again, underestimating Trump. So I think you see that's why, if Harris beats her polls, that might be why, because pollsters are trying to adjust to show Trump doing a little better.
Two more questions, and you'll be able to go back to your normal life and to your gym charts and everything. So one question related to in general, how come the American, not necessarily the US system, but the US culture, allow the presence and the work of pressure groups, lobbyists, donors to influence the policies and the electors?
Yeah. Well, we're in this age where our Supreme Court, it made a very consequential ruling back in 2010 called Citizens United. Our Supreme Court has made the determination that money equals speech. So we have a system now where both sides have these influential groups that raise money. They are called PACs, that kind of support either or both sides, that these PACs can raise unlimited money and they can spend on behalf of anyone they want. There are some rules, like the individual candidates can't coordinate directly with the PACs that are funding or like helping them. So there is a little bit of that, but no, it is like the Wild West. I mean, it is like, if you look at how much money is going to be spent in this one election, overall, we're looking at least 16 billion, which is crazy. A little earlier, I was talking about, like, one of the key Senate races this year is going to be in the state of Ohio. If you look at just what the outside PACs have raised, not even the candidates, it's like $500 million or something like that. It is crazy. And like at
Is it the
first,
most expensive campaign, actually?
yes. It's just for some perspective, I saw, like, just in the presidential election, we're going to have like 16 billion spent. That's double what we spent in 2016. So it's going up and up and up. At first the Democrats were the ones who take this kind of high horse of, we're not going to take corporate dollars. We hate big money, but you can't compete like that. So they've kind of made the decision that we have to raise money too. So
Wow.
yeah, I would say, back in 2020, we did not know the winner of the election until the Friday or Saturday after the election. Part of that was during the pandemic, you had so many people vote by mail. Those in most states take a little longer to count. I would, it's hard to make any guarantees just because these states are so close. But I would say at least we might know a little earlier than the weekend before, so maybe Thursday. There are some states like, one of the kind of toss-up states is going to be Arizona. That's one that's a mail-in state. It takes a week or so to count. So maybe at least earlier than last time, but I would be surprised if we have a call like that night or that day after. So in terms of who I think wins, honestly, I go back and forth each day. I think, as I kind of alluded to a little earlier, Harris is going to probably win the popular vote at least. So big question is if that can if she wins the popular vote by enough to win the Electoral College. As I said earlier, I could see this being a year where like polling underestimates Harris. So I could see her doing a little better. One thing we kind of keep track of when we think of polling is sometimes it's the case where one side's people are just more excited to answer the phone and take polls. Well, like if you think about this year, this is the first time that Donald Trump has been in the general election and he's not the underdog. So I think the
What does
effect
that
of
mean?
that. So basically, the past two times in 2016 and 2020, Trump was not the favorite, right?
Yeah.
So this time where he's looking possibly like a bit of a favorite, his people, his voters could just be more excited to take polls and be in your face. So maybe that silent vote is going to be, you could have some people, even some former more traditional types of Republicans who may go into the voting booth and say, I just can't take Trump anymore, right? So I think Harris could maybe overperform her polls and win, but we'll see.